All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for checking what I'm hoping is the first of many YouTube videos in the future. Essentially, what this is going to be is a devlog on my journey through creating a third-person game from scratch, no previous experience. Essentially, what I'm using is the helpful information I'm finding on YouTube and different tutorials online. I do have a background in visual design, so I'm kind of trying to implement that at the same time. So here we go. I don't really have much settled in terms of specific information for the game just yet. I do know it is going to be a third party game or a third person game. Um, I do know I want it for adults to play, where it's not going to be too kiddish, not too cartoony. Definitely be RPG with like some kind of survival style basis thrown in there. So as we have the Unreal Engine loaded in here, I just created a new game or a new level or playout or whatever it's called in this case. Excuse me. A lot of basic content in there. I did include the starter content that does come with the Unreal Engine. Um, let's see. So what I will be doing in this video is very basic, just to get the groundwork going, literally. What I'm doing here is zooming out. Now, please keep in mind I am still learning this program, so you'll notice I'm still figuring out all the movements for the camera and stuff like that. But here, what I'm just trying to do is create a landscape. I don't want to make anything too big, but something that will feel expansive for the player, at least while I'm building this, but not something that's going to take too long to load or anything like that. So this is the first time I'm actually using the sections, and I'm actually splitting it to 2 by 2. Normally I leave it 1 by 1, but I wanted to try something different this time, and I also lowered it a bit to the 31 by 31 quads. So that green is where it will build once I hit create. There we go. And let's see here. It wants me to sculpt right away, but I'm not going to do that just yet. With the other program or the other projects I've started to practice, I did go right into sculpting. I'm actually going to try something different. Um, Here, what I'm doing now is setting up the nav mesh bounds. So what I learned in the tutorials, this is essentially what will keep the player on the map. As you can see, it is flat, and once it hits that edge, it's just open void. So what I want to do is just put a block on there so that way, as I'm testing this out, as I'm building things, I'm actually able to stay on the map itself. So using like the X and Y vertices, I'm just changing the dimensions of the bounds. The yellow marker obviously is where that marker is. I want to get it to the edge, but not quite to the end there. I'll probably change the camera in a second just to see a bit better. Now this took me some trial and error. First I had to learn first not to use the scale, but to use the actual brush shape to change the sizing of it. Then I had to learn the the correct way of adding the Y, or excuse me, not the Y, the Z. That way, a player is able to go up over mountains and down into valleys and not get blocked out. The last thing I do here as well is I will add a hollow element to it. For some reason, I found that helps. It pretty much what it does is creates an invisible 3D wall, um, which just again stops the player from getting in. So if you're looking at the screen now, that yellow boundary you see on the outside, that's the marker for the nav mesh bounds. And then about to click hollow here. And yeah, just set a wall thickness. I found adding just a bit to it gives it some solidity. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to scope to make sure that the bounds are actually on the landscape itself and haven't fallen over. Excuse me. And I want to try something here. I thought I saw somebody able to like play the game right from where the camera is. That's what I was trying to test there, but for some reason, it just kept going behind the player. After going back and forth a bit, it suddenly realized on me that with these third-party camera setups, the camera's set up right behind that character at all times. So that's why every time I hit play, it's always dropping right behind them. I'm sure there's a way to switch it so I can drop in right from where my camera is located instead of right behind the player, but not that big of a deal. All right, so what I'm doing here, as you saw when you start building the game, it does give you like a preset arena. So now that I have my landscape in place, I want to test it out. So by doing so, I have to let the player actually be able to reach over there. So I'm opening up the wall to just see if the player can run out. Um, Here, I believe I'm testing the starter thing again to see if the camera will start there. But as you can tell, it starts right behind me again in the original place. Just gonna mess with the settings here a bit. It's not till later that I realize why that's not working, but I figure it out eventually. I think the pressure of knowing this would be a eventual YouTube video had me going back and forth like, let's make this work. And here I believe I start running that way. And then once I realize how far this is, I give up and I'm like, no way. So what I do is in this case, I go to plan B. And instead of moving the camera or having running over there, I just end up moving the actual starting point of the character. So you can see the little preview window there where what it looks like from the starting point. Essentially, I'm just moving it closer to the edge just to test out that nav mesh bounds that we set up earlier, just to make sure that I'm not falling off the map. So it's a pretty big map, even though it's not too big just yet, but a good starting point. And as you can tell, it actually did not work the first time I tried it. Goes right off the map, open void. So what I do is I end up going back into the settings here and see what I might have missed to enable like the blocking or the collision. So as I scroll through the settings here in a second, that's essentially what I'm gonna realize. First, actually, what I'm checking here is just to make sure that I didn't miss the edge of the map, and just to make sure that the edge actually does fall on it. And as you can tell, it's right there on the edge, and I did leave a little overlap, so that's okay. So as I scroll through the settings here, just looking around, see what's going on here. Expand that a little bit so I can see a bit better. I'm still trying to figure out a good setup for my screen. Eventually, I'll get dual monitors, but for now, I'm working with just one. That's best I have. But here, I'm actually changing the collision presets. So I changed it to invisible wall, and I found that this helps me for now. Essentially, acts for exactly what I wanted for an invisible wall. So as I go back to test it here, bang, can't go anywhere. And just to test, I like doing the little wall run. So that's good. So now, as I test this out, as I go around doing different things on this map, I won't have to worry about falling off. I like always doing that first, just in case if I have started playing around with like AIs and stuff like that. I just like having that set up in case I just let one run wild. He can make sure he stays on the map itself. And so here, what I'm doing, now that I no longer need this, I'm actually going to clear a lot of this starter stuff. Now, the geometry, like the walls, the floor, that ramp that you see there, the text, all of that stuff I can remove for sure. I'm still learning about light sources, stuff like that. So I didn't want to erase too much. These boundaries I did get rid of. I figured if it's only located to that area, it must not be that important. As long as the general light source is there. So at some point I will remove, like right here it asks if I want to remove that. I said no. So once I get rid of these other boundaries, I'm gonna get rid of that cube in a second too. Oh, and here I actually deleted the wrong light source, so I wanted to go back. And then I found zooming in and out. For me, for some reason, that dark gray is an indicator that it's right. So I just wanted to make sure I got that shade of gray again instead of that really, really light gray that they showed there a second ago. Um, so once I get rid of all these extras, and as you can tell, I'm kind of cautious. I go back and forth and I read it before I clicking it or delete it. Um, Trying to just guess what I may or may not need there. Yeah, definitely not the landscape. I think what I'm looking for, there we go, was that little floating orb that was there. Always in the starter content. There we go. And then now that those structures are gone, I believe what I'm going to start doing now is just organizing a little bit. I have the lighting all in one folder. I believe I end up moving the landscape and all of that into its own folder. And then once I have that organized, just a little bit of cleaning up, that's when I'm going to get started on what I'm going to call for now the rough starting point. Essentially, as I build this game, is essentially how I'm going to develop the different concepts, storylines, characters, NPCs, all of that stuff. Artistic and visual effects. Um, I'm super artistic anyway, so it's gonna pop up naturally. But I'm trying to leave most of that major stuff till the end, and I'll do what's called gray boxing for now, where I'm just essentially laying out basic geometry, kind of getting a story of where things will lie. What I'm doing here is essentially setting the character back to the center of the map. Um, so I just go to the location and literally just set it back to 000, right to the center of the map here. Um, but, oh, that's right. What happens here, because he's at 000, he's at the same level as the landscape. So essentially, he's considered under the ground. So what I'm doing here is just lifting him up and over. And because he has physics enabled, he won't fall through the ground now. So just testing that out just to make sure, but he's good to go, and now he's right in the center there. So seeing that I don't know fully everything regarding this game yet as I build it, I just want something like a home base, something to get started where I have an indoor setting and I can start building the outdoor environment and landscape. So that's what I'm gonna start doing here. I will need to get the information, and forgive me, as my first video, I'm still gathering notes on what I definitely need to include going forward. But there is a video I want to link out to the a developer who actually did a series of videos on his devlog on a game that he's creating, where he does the same thing, where he's creating pretty much his levels using just these gray boxes, and then later he will go in and add some material, some textures, and make them look good. So that's what I'm doing here for now. Again, I have no plan just yet of what I'm doing just yet. I'm just getting some general, just placing things down. If I like them, awesome. If I don't like them, I'll leave them for now. And if they're really bothering me, I'll get rid of them. It's not the end of the world. But just to get something there. So essentially, what's going through my mind right now is just to get a house, just something there. So a lot of the games I play, I mean, my games vary for everywhere from sports, first-person shooters, but a good basis of them are RPGs. And an RPG, a classic one that I would consider a classic that started my RPG crave was definitely the Pokemon games on the Game Boy. Um, I felt that story of being in this new world, like experiencing what a kid at that time would experience, essentially opening their eyes at the same time we're opening our eyes to the story. That always resonated with me. So I won't be surprised if a lot of those kind of aspects or RPG aspects get involved in this game on a more adult level. I do want to stress that what I want to do is develop something that adults are going to be like, wow, this is like my childhood plus 15, 20 years. um, so with that whole idea in mind, essentially what I'm building here is like a home, kind of like in that RPG, in that Game Boy game. You start in a home as if you just opened your eyes and you were just made aware of where you are. Not to say that it's going to start off that same way, but I just like that idea of starting somewhere and you're introduced to the world that you're going to explore now. You'll you'll notice I do have a bit of OCD, so I do like testing out like the corners and stuff like that, make sure they're nice and sharp. Um, Eventually, that I give up on that once I realize how time consuming that can get. Um, but for now, I'll just keep going, adding on to it. Um, and that's something else I like. I'm getting used to are the controls and the hotkeys. Learning how to switch between like the scaling, the rotation, the directional. Um, so yeah, so far so good. I didn't think it would take me this long to get a couple walls up, but hey, I mean, it comes with practice. Um, oh, one thing I did forget to notice, or forget to mention, I am currently using the starter content to build these walls. This isn't something that I saw other people doing. I actually saw them using the gray checkerboard. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a block or cube. I forget the word for it right this second. But I saw it in that starter content, so I wanted to try it out and see what the major difference was. Um, Eventually, what I realized, and actually, I didn't scroll enough through the settings to check if this had that. But what I do like about the gray boxes is the ability to change the size using the brush settings. Where in this for this one, I'm essentially stuck with a square, and I'm just dragging those and laying them next to them if I want to make a rectangle or anything of that sort. Again, I didn't go through the settings to see if I can change the sizing like the checkered boxes, but ultimately I do switch. Um, I also, for some reason, what popped into my head is I figured if it came with the engine, normally it probably takes up a little less data than something like this that was external to start with. Um, so eventually I do scrap that. The other thing that bothered me, do you see how those walls overlaid on each other and you can kind of see them going back and forth? That also bothered me. So having that OCD, I was like, nope, forget it. Let's go the way we know. Um, so essentially, instead of using the starter content, I just switch over to the geometry section. I fumble around here for a second, but eventually I go over to the geometry section. There we go. And yep, the box. There we go. The box, not a block. And as you can see, it's checkered just like the or landscape. I'm not. I think that's just the standard that Unreal uses. But this here is the brush settings, and as you can tell, just by messing with this, I'm able to change all the different dimensions of that box. Um, so here, I believe I forget which what I settled on. I think it's like 50 or 75. Oh, 25 maybe. There we go. And essentially these will become the walls, the ceiling, different things. Actually, it doesn't have to be limited just to the buildings. um, these will essentially just be placeholders um, for different parts of the map. Um, so for example, like I'll build some houses with this, and again, it depends on the game itself and the environment where it depends where I would end up throwing this character. But for now, it's gonna make a house. But let's say in the future I need to make I don't know. Let's say we got to make some like fortresses or buildings or cars or anything of the sort, like a cave. Instead of actually going in and fully sculpting out a cave and all of that good stuff, I can just use these blocks for now as placeholders, almost like Legos. Create it, build it up, and then later, once everything's laid out, I can go in and add the finer details with something sculpted, a mesh. Um, so seeing that I had the character centered, I believe what I'm doing here is actually trying to um, lay this out directly behind him to try to have him start directly in the middle. I clicked a bunch of extra stuff here, so I'm just trying to close that out. There we go. So now I'm going to mess with these different dimensions to create a size that I thought would be good. I believe actually I just doubled or tripled. There we go. Yeah, it looks like I tripled it up. And then just using the eye, I just laid this back one right behind him just to see what happens here. And oh, this is duplicated, and I'm just rotating it as a sidewall. I don't remember if I leave it this big. I think I might lower the sizing a bit. I don't remember. Let's see. Kind of far away. Hopefully I zoom in a bit here. There we go. And again, I'm still learning. I do unconventional movements here, whatever works for me. Right now I'm using a mouse. I do have a Huion tablet connected, but I have not used it enough to feel confident enough to actually use it for navigating or using it in here just yet. I don't know the best way to do so. So if you do know, please feel free to leave a comment below and just leave your recommendations. I'm kind of getting the hang of the mouse. Um, I'm not sure what other people use, like in the industry. So yeah, again, if you have any comments or if you have any preferences or any hints, please leave a comment. Let me know. I'm learning. I'm here to learn. I want to make sure that not only am I building this from scratch, but I'm absorbing information that's going to help me build stuff in the future. So please share. All right, so let's see here. So I believe I'm just going to copy this one and move it over. Yep, keep it uniform. And again, that OCD ended up slowing down the process just a little bit as I kept going back and forth to like check the corners, see like I checked the inside, and then I believe I run around the outside to check that out as well. Yeah. And at some point or another, I'd realize, yeah, this is not worth my time, especially if it's just a placeholder. And then last but not least, we need the front. And essentially, I just trapped my character. Just put him right back in the box like he started. Um, but again, that great tutorial, which again, I'm going to link once I get a chance. Um, he did go over using the additive and the subtractive properties of these boxes. So once I end up just fixing this box here so that it fits, because as you can tell, it has like that corner. Then again, this is just my OCD still kicking, and eventually I give up on that. I have to build a door. So using the subtractive value, excuse me, of the boxes, I'm actually able to create that door. Um, yep, still finagling this front. That OCD. There we go. I think that does it. All these little movements. It's funny to watch it after the fact. I can definitely point out the point. It might not be this video. It might be the next video. I could definitely point out the point where I'm like, okay, this OCD's gotta stop right now. Now it'll definitely come in handy when I get to the more detailed phase of this building, but as of right now, and just making sure I'm a rat, as in stuck in this maze, can't get out. There we go. Yep, just looking around, making sure everything looks good. All right, so I believe this is actually where um, I start to organize everything. Once I realized that there were going to be so many different boxes and stuff like that everywhere, I had to start creating these folders. So I left the lighting one together. The render FX ones are all good. Um, what I end up doing is creating one called building ones, just as an identifier, just so that if I ever have to work on this group as a whole, um, easy way to find it, easy way to get to that group. So I'll just end up putting this one together as building one. And then I start to gather everything else in their own individual folders. Um, but for this one, I'm gonna put in all the walls. Eventually, I'll put in like the ceiling and everything like that into this folder. Um, and again, depending on the way this builds out, if I do end up having to build any other buildings or anything like that, I'll obviously give them their own folders. So like building one, two, three, whatever down the line. As for the building, I'm not really sure what I'm gonna put in there just yet. Um, Again, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna use that old school Pokemon like red, blue, and yellow um, as like a reference, as like a rough starting point. So in my head right now, I just have that vague bedroom kind of feel, like he just woke up. But again, that depends on the story because in that storyline, he's that's his everyday. That's what he's used to. Part of me kind of wants to introduce the character as well as the audience to something new. I'm not quite sure just yet, so I kind of feel like I'm just gonna build and just see where my mind goes from here. Um, I will eventually be opening up a Discord channel. I do have a Patreon I'm setting up in the moment, where I will open up that channel for people to leave different comments, leave their feedback, just to see what their interest would be in this game. Obviously, please feel free to leave that in the comments. If you have any ideas, if I triggered anything that you like, please feel free to let me know. Um, but yeah, now that that's all cleaned up, have it all in folders. Again, little trace of OCD. In this case, that OCD is good though. I have been warned that these kind of programs can generate files like no tomorrow. So keeping it organized should be a good idea. Should help me out in the long run. Yep. So here I'm gonna get back to building that door that I mentioned earlier. So again, I just have to add in another box. And once I have it sized the way I like, I didn't want anything too big. Actually, I believe what I was thinking about as I built this one was a what in my mind I would call a space door. Essentially, what I'm thinking about is a door, um, the ones that slide like open. Like if you think of like the movie Aliens or Halo, anything like that, like those big, heavy metal doors that like slide open, something like that. So for this, what I actually have to do is 50 was the size of the wall normally. So because I want to make this subtractive, what I'm doing is I actually made it a little bit wider than the wall itself. That way it would fully clear the material. Instead of creating a dent, it fully clears through. And what I just did there was took a look behind the character to kind of get a ratio to see how big I wanted to make this door. So I believe I liked the height. Actually, I'm not quite sure if I settled on that just yet, but the width is what I was looking at first. Yep. Actually, I believe that's what I settled on right there. The height, however, I'm not sure if I changed that or if I have to test it. Yep, I increased it a little bit just to be on the safe side. There you go. And then I thought switching it there would add the subtractive value, but I realized after that that's if you're adding a new one. Once you create it, there's a different button you have to click. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out, hey, it's not working. It's still adding. And then I'll look over and eventually I find the details. There you go, brush type, and then switch it subtractive. And just like that, it clears the door that I need right in the building. So now test it out a little bit. And I actually really like that size. Whether I keep it or not, not sure, but I liked how that worked out. There we go. So now just looking around, making sure everything looks good. And as of right now, I think that's a good starting point for the building. Um, yeah, so from there, um, that's the first video. So what I'll do from now is continue working on building on concepts. The next video, I'm actually going to get started on building out a little bit more of the landscape using some sculpting tools. Um, so yeah, please feel free to check that video as well. I really look forward to putting some time into this as this has become a major interest of mine lately. And I really look forward to working on a project that is going to be built pretty much from scratch from my hand, like with hands, no experience, and kind of re-engages the mind and forces me to think creatively. So yeah, please like the channel, please subscribe, please hit the little bell. That way you get all the notifications. Um, and that way any updates you guys get right away and any new videos I post, you'll get alerted right away. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to hopefully having you guys watch my next ones. Thank you.